Michigan is the third largest Christmas tree producer in the United States. There is a federal quarantine for spongy moth, which is Lymantria dispar. It's a caterpillar that affects hardwoods mostly, but it can also be moved around on Christmas trees and nursery stock. Hardwood, you may have learned more of the terminology deciduous, so those trees that will lose their leaves in the fall. And so that's a hardwood tree. The spongy moth prefers to eat those leaves, but when there's a high pressure, the spongy moth caterpillars, they'll say, I'm hungry and I'll move on to the conifers, which are your Christmas tree evergreen trees with needles. And so what we do for Christmas tree inspections that are going to be moving from Michigan to outside of the quarantine area, which is basically anywhere westward, southward part of the country, we make sure that there are no life stages of that spongy moth on any of the trees that could then escape when they enter those other states. They lay egg masses on the trunks of the trees, and so we will just go around and look at all the trees. We kind of lift up the branches here, look down at the trunk and these lower branches. That's where you would see the egg masses right up against the trunk, and that's the easiest way to look for them. A Christmas tree that has spongy moth on it will not necessarily die, but it will carry that egg mass, which will have hundreds of baby caterpillars on it, to its new location and could hatch and then infest that area with the spongy moth caterpillar. And then sometimes when the caterpillars they hatch on the conifer trees or in the Christmas tree fields, they can eat the needles and you'll see some damage, and the growers don't like to see that, but they're not really going to necessarily kill the tree unless it's a really heavy infestation. When it completely kills all the needles, there's going to be enough needles for it to still photosynthesize and survive. Our methodology for looking at the Christmas trees during inspections depends on the species, and so pine trees are lower risk in that the spongy moth cannot complete their life cycle on a pine tree. And so if a caterpillar makes its way onto a pine tree, it's not going to be able to eat enough of that tree and get enough nutrients to be able to go through its pupation and into an adult and lay its egg masses. And so for that purpose, we kind of do a simpler inspection where we look at the perimeter. We look at those hardwood trees, they prefer to eat the hardwood trees, which so the field might be right up against a tree line of those hardwoods. So we're going to look really hard at those trees and the perimeter, any hardwoods inside of the field, and then we're going to call that field okay. And then if we find any egg masses, we restrict any movement of those trees to outside of the quarantine area, just those trees closest to the egg mass find for pine trees, like I said, because they're lower risk. For other species of Christmas tree like spruce fir and Douglas fir, they can complete their life cycle on those species. And so we do a more strict inspection to make sure that we're finding anything that might be there to prevent their movement from inside the quarantine zone to outside of the quarantine zone. So we not only look at the perimeter and take a hard look at those hardwood trees, those deciduous trees, we also do an X through the field in case there was caterpillars that blew into the field and were able to complete their life cycle on those species and turn into adults and then lay their egg masses, which are then the most transportable form of spongy moth that moves on Christmas tree stock. The sooner we find an invasive pest, the more tools we have in the toolbox to eradicate it. And so we want everyone that is able to look for these invasive species to do that and help us out so that we can find it as fast as possible. There are different things that you can do as a homeowner. Typically, if a tree is infested with the caterpillars and you see a lot of defoliation, it can be really shocking, and everyone might say like, well, what's going to happen to my trees that I love, my beautiful oak trees? If that defoliation happens early enough in the year, which it typically does, the trees will grow another round of leaves back and they'll be able to survive. And as long as they're not stressed by other things like drought or flood or anything like that, they should recover just fine, especially if it's not a repeated year after year after year thing. If you have a prized tree or a couple of trees that you want to protect, you can look for the egg masses. You can scrape those egg masses off. They look like a little brown fuzzy splotch on the tree. And so if you see those, you can scrape those off, put them into some soapy water and kill basically the eggs so they won't hatch, and that'll knock the population down. There's some sprays that you can use to control spongy moth, and I would recommend talking to MSU Extension to get those recommendations. So spongy moth is not dangerous to people or pets. The danger it is to the plants, and so it will move around on not only trees, but things like lumber, and they can lay their egg masses on any kind of woody item. And so the places that don't have it already, where it's not already defoliating their forests, they don't want it. And so we're trying to keep it in the places where it already is. Inspectors work hard to make sure that our Christmas trees are inspected and able to move from state to state if the grower wishes to do that. And we work really hard to get it done in this short time frame. And if you're interested in shipping Christmas trees outside of the quarantine zone, you can always reach out to me or one of the local inspectors, fill out an application, and we can come inspect your fields. If you want more information, you can visit our website, michigan.gov/invasives.